All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Navigating No Contact with Toxic Parents. I'm your host, Tracy Principe. And today I have a super special guest I'm very excited about talking to Mary Toolan. Mary is a Scapegoat Child Recovery Specialist. She works with people across the globe and she facilitates the recovery from childhood and adulthood parental bullying and family mobbing. So she has an ebook on the subject of dysfunctional families, and that's been downloaded hundreds of people. And she also has knowledge of this kind of taboo abuse that comes from her own lived experience, which we're going to talk about today, of being the family scapegoat. And then her decades of research and training and undertaken the final to find effective solutions for her own trauma recovery from being the family scapegoat. So she has group and individual coaching programs that has been described as life-changing, providing results with warp speed. And then Mary has a website, which is www.marytoolan.com. It's MaryToolan.com. And then on Instagram, she's at Scapegoat Child Recovery. So check her out on Instagram, and I'll be posting those as well. So let's get started. Mary, I am so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you very much, Tracy, for the invite. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah. So I thought we could start, um, by maybe if sharing a little bit of what your story was and what that means to be a scapegoat.
Yeah, so I grew up in the role of the family scapegoat. Obviously, I didn't know that as a child, or I didn't have the language for it.
Yeah.
But yes, I was in some families' roles fluctuate and change. For me, I was always the scapegoat. So I have
Mm.
memories from a very, very young age of being bullied by my parents.
Mm.
One parent in particular was overtly, relentlessly bullying me, and then the other parent was kind of bit of an enabler, just kind of standing by, watching it
Mm.
all happen, not very helpful. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, it was just relentless bullying, being the laughing stock. Like I couldn't do anything right, and it just also a lot of monitoring as well. It was just weird
Mm.
things going on in the family home. Periods of calm, but then you're kind of walking on eggshells. You don't know when the inevitable
Mm.
attack is going to happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, just and then kind of the parent kind of indoctrinating my two siblings to join in.
Mm.
So there was just no let up, and it was like constant boundary violations. So anytime, like remember one instance in particular when I was about age 12, and got very angry with my parents who was, goading me and really wanting like some kind of response from me. I got very angry. And then the
Mm-hmm.
response to that was to kind of mock me further and imitate how I responded and the words I used, and pulled in my siblings to laugh at me and
Mm.
me as well. So it was kind of like, injury on top of injury. And it was just
Yeah.
very clear that there was no solution to this. Like, whatever
Wow.
you try to do to make this bullying stop, you can never win. There's
Right.
no solution to this. So you can try all you like, but I,
Yeah.
the parent, I'm just going to do what I want when I want, and you have absolutely
Mm-hmm.
no say in the matter.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very stressful, and obviously caused me huge anxiety, and just to kind of
Mm.
be shut down as well, because I didn't have a voice growing up.
Right.
And it's, of course, dysfunctional family. It's very difficult to individuate as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So that sounds really stressful. Um, and you couldn't get out of there,
It was a sense
obviously,
of being
right?
trapped, a real sense of being trapped. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because especially I thought the other parent was kind of safer. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but when I went to them for help, it was like, oh, it's my reaction to this bullying that is the problem. It's like, you're too
Mm.
sensitive. You need to learn how to take a joke. They're only messing. They're only laughing. You take
Yeah.
it far too seriously. So it was
Mm.
very disorientating, very confusing, and just it was trauma on top of trauma, year after year, all throughout my developmental years. And
Right.
yeah, it was very, very difficult.
Mm. Yeah. And at what point did did you realize that that wasn't normal, something was wrong? Did you leave home at 18 right away, or can you share a little bit about
Yes,
that?
yeah, I mean, I left home at 21.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always, like I always knew, because
Yeah.
the one parent's bullying was so obvious, so
Yeah.
that was always there. But then, of course, you kind of slip into kind of denial. It's not so bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. They're not like that 100% of the time.
Right.
So you kind of have to minimize it to yourself. Everybody else is minimizing it. This is
Right.
nothing. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it. Yeah, so you minimize it to yourself, and then you have to take on element of denial about it. Otherwise, there's no way to cope with it.
Right.
So there's a lot of layers to it, and then it gets more complex as the years go on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always knew it was like that, but then it was kind of, I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the foundation, I didn't have the strength to fully step away from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew if once, so long as I was living in the same country as them, they're always going to, they would have turned up on my doorstep. There was kind of I just kind of knew intrinsically that I can't really get away from them. So, I
Yeah.
mean, the route I went down, especially in my teenage years when
Mm-hmm.
bullying was there every single day, was to go into a kind of obedient daughter role to try and be
Mm.
perfect. That was my strategy. If I can be perfect, they'll have nothing to pick on me about. They're
Wow.
always
Right.
pointing out flaws, always
Mm.
trying to pin something on me. And if they couldn't pin something on me, they would just fabricate something out of thin air.
Right.
And you could just be bullied for anything. Like if you were in the kitchen and you just dropped something on the floor, that was
Mm.
a brilliant excuse to start
Yeah.
laughing at you and calling you names and everything like that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, did you have a moment where you are you no contact with your family?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And is when you went no contact, did you find that you got clarity in that about what really happened to you, or was there some kind of light bulb moment?
I got clarity in the years prior to going
Mm-hmm.
on contact. And
Okay.
then I knew it was just going to be cataclysmic for me to go no contact. I knew that
Mm-hmm.
sleeping volcano would erupt. So it
Yeah.
wasn't until I was in my 40s, until I was able to go no contact
Mm-hmm.
with them. And can't remember. I can't remember the rest of the question.
Yeah, I was what so well let's talk about this if we could. When you
Mhm.
went no contact, did they continue to try to hoover and bully you and make contact with you, or did they leave you alone?
Yeah, they did. Yes, yes. So it was
Mhm.
very much like so much enmeshment in the
Mm.
family, and I really had this kind of role, like obviously with hindsight, had this role where I was like holding the family together on a kind of
Mm.
energetic level, like being the emotional shock absorber for all the
Okay.
pain and trauma,
Yeah.
and almost like carrying the trauma of my parents as well, like kind of having responsibility to carry that and being
Yeah.
the scapegoat so everybody else could have this sea of normality or
Mm.
peaceful kind of status quo. So long as I
Right.
was in the role of the scapegoat, taking all the
Hmm.
bullying on the chin, everybody else could go about their day-to-day life and feel like they were part of this perfect family, which of course to the
Right.
outside world there was a facade of
Yeah.
family.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you left, did somebody else take the role of the scapegoat?
So when I left, so I just sent them a text to say, listen,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just taking some time out. I'll be back in touch when I'm ready.
Yeah.
And that was the kind of, set off alarm bells.
Yeah.
And yeah, then things started to kind of collapse within the family system. And they
Mm.
kind of knew, I don't know, they kind of knew on an energetic level that, she means business, like this
Yeah.
something weird happening here. You could just almost feel it in the airways from
Mm.
like England to Ireland when I sent that text that like
Oh, wow.
something shifted in the air.
Yeah.
And yes, there was a lot of hoovering, a lot of texts, a real sense of anger from them, like, how dare you? They didn't
Mm.
say that, but that was the kind of energetic response. People being very
Yeah.
angry. Then one of my parents took ill, so there was text
Mm-hmm.
messages. They're ill now. Do you realize they're ill?
Mm.
How could you dare do this to your parents in their elderly age? So all this type of messages,
Right.
missed phone calls, and then it was me, the process then of blocking
Yeah.
them on social media, blocking the phone numbers, everything
Yeah.
like that, because I was, that was a point of no return when I sent
Right.
the text and when I realized the whole dynamic of everything that was happening and actually how serious it was, how
Yeah.
serious the situation was. And yeah, it was
Mm.
pretty terrifying as well, the whole thing of, what are they, a sense also of what are they going to do to retaliate now that I
Mm.
stood up for myself
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well. So it was pretty terrifying. And I was grateful that I was living in a different country and there was an ocean
Mm-hmm.
between us as well. That kind of
Mm.
felt a little bit safer.
Yeah. So you bring up a good point because a lot of people really struggle with that, just being absolutely terrified, especially with these enmeshed parents that
Mm,
are really bullies,
yeah.
right? And they're just coming after, and they're relentless and they don't quit.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying, especially when when the nervous system is feeling that anxiety and the stress levels are really high. Um, what do you say to people that have that fear and sometimes they stay in that contact because the fear is so great to separate that because they are afraid of that retaliation and sometimes that is very real,
Mm-hmm.
a real threat, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
every situation is different, and the way the family will respond when the scapegoat escapes is different.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Hmm.
they just absolutely blank you, but you'll
Yeah.
you'll you'll have a kind of a fair idea of how they are going to respond.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's a matter of a lot of preparation beforehand to make sure that you feel safe, you're
Hmm.
physically safe, and also actually what helped me a lot was a somatic experiencing. I know that's your area as well.
Mm.
And actually, I couldn't, it was really difficult for me to go no contact from an intellectual space or a mental space. But
Yeah.
every time I went to visit them, I would get physically ill. So it
Mm.
was like my
Yeah.
body was making the decision for me. So that's kind of what
Right.
a little bit easier when I went no contact and the hoovering was very, very intense. I
Mm.
knew like I can't be on the phone with these people because it affects me physically.
Right.
It was like I could feel my immune system deteriorating when
Yes.
near them, in the same room as them, or if I had to be on the phone with them. So it was a
Yes.
no for me.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And that's a lot of people, unfortunately, it takes really the body breaking down
Mm,
to get to that point of
yeah,
my body is really speaking for me
yes,
and saying
absolutely.
no, no more, right? Yeah,
Absolutely.
because that accumulative, that developmental trauma and then into adulthood, it's just an accumulation and that the body's been holding for,
Yeah.
20,
Mm,
30, 40 years.
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's very
yeah.
stressful.
It's very extremely stressful. So, yeah, so sometimes, it's really truly about self-preservation.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, setting things up in advance and trying to be one step ahead of them. Like
mhm.
when you're considering no contact, okay, what are they going to, how are they going to retaliate? What are they going to do? How can I keep myself safe? Um,
Yeah,
what do I need from my childhood home? Like, get whatever belongings you need because you're not going to be going
yeah.
there as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And if
It's
they're
just nothing I can
using,
do.
yeah, if they're weaponizing things like that, oftentimes those childhood mementos or, or if they're still in the family home, they're weaponized or even destroyed
Mm,
by the
yeah.
parent. Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot
Yeah.
of times they can use things like that for their hoovering, such
Mm-hmm.
like documentation or something like, there's this form we
Yes.
need you to fill in. What's your address? We need to send it to you.
That's
The
right.
solicitor needs these details. They'll use
Yeah.
anything to get
Yeah.
like just even a smidgen of contact. I think that's what frustrated my family so much.
Mm.
They got very irate because they just got nothing from me after that last text. They got
Yeah.
zero.
I got zero.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about that if we could, that the more subtle forms of manipulation, which might even look like gift giving or, money is a big control, weapon of
Mm,
control,
yeah.
or these more subtle things of forms or birth certificates or social security. I hear that a lot.
Mm,
Needing, or they'll come back with, oh, I want you to be a part of the will or my
yeah.
power of attorney. Those kinds of
Mm,
things I hear a
yeah.
lot about, those more subtle
Yes.
manipulation tools, right?
Yeah, I had that as well. Like they were trying to send me money and I didn't
Mm,
respond. And then they went down to the bank to try and the bank wouldn't let them send through the money because they didn't have like an IBAN or something. They didn't have a number.
yeah.
So yeah. And yes, they will try everything. So again, like the more prepared you can be before
Hmm.
that with all your like affairs in that situation, the better. And what keeps people stuck in that and a feeling of obligation and responsibility is a kind of a trauma bond that might be happening
Yes,
there. So
that's
which
right.
which has its roots in childhood. So that's like the younger part of the psyche that is
Yeah.
terrified, terrified of being punished, terrified of being abandoned, which is
Yes.
really what it falls down to, and terrified of being ostracized and rejected. But the thing
Hmm.
is, all of that has happened already. All of that happened in
Mm.
childhood. You were abandoned, rejected, and
Mm.
ostracized in childhood.
Right.
So, and it's just getting the adult self on board. Okay, I can handle this. I can deal with this. But yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot of psychological manipulation and mind games. And
Hmm.
especially the tricky thing is before we go no contact, we haven't had that time away from them. It's a kind of a chicken and egg situation because when we
Yes.
do go no contact, you get a bit more psychological space, physical distance, and time to digest and
Yeah.
assimilate all the things that have gone on and get your own sense of grounding and your own sense of self. But the
Yes.
period before you go no contact, you don't have that luxury. So you can still get caught up in the trap with everything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the more support you can have with somebody who understands it, the better. And it's very
Absolutely.
tricky as well, because people can be giving you advice that is very ill-advised and very damaging
Right.
advice. And, oh, like,
Yes.
write a letter to your parents. Have you tried talking? You know, the invalidation is huge in this area because it's such a
Yeah.
taboo form of abuse.
Right.
We need to
That's
be
right.
very mindful about that.
Yes, and I hear that all the time from people, um, because of the taboo of, you're breaking up with your family, and even from therapists or other helping, professionals that have biases will tell people to stay in contact or work it out or, forgive, and that's very harmful and
Very, yeah, very.
damaging. Yeah.
I've had that
Yes.
myself, and my clients have experienced that as well. It can set back your healing decades.
Yes.
So it's very, very damaging, and it's vital when we're doing this work to work with people
Mhm.
who really, really have a deep understanding of the nature of this abuse, so that you can be
Absolutely.
supported and helped.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. So, so important because of the lack of understanding and the uncomfortable nature. It makes people uncomfortable. And so their response is going to be, oh, well, just work it out or try harder or, those kinds of things because it just makes people uncomfortable.
There's a
Um,
tension that's there, like when
yeah,
there's no contact, and it's like there's not a resolution, and like those parents can go on and be deceased, and you're not going to get a resolution to it. Like there
right,
is no resolution, there is no closure. So
right.
we create our own closure with the situation, because you're never going to have that conversation with your
Yeah,
parent and get to understand what was going on, what their motives were, and forget about an apology or anything like that. Like
right.
nothing like that. So that can also be a difficult thing to navigate as well. That the uncertainty and this kind of stuff, something is left hanging in the air when you go
Hmm.
as well. But that's just something we deal with when we're the scapegoat child in recovery.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I always say is that, that person that we're trying to heal from is not available for repair work, right? So we
Yeah, good way of
gotta,
putting
yeah, we've got to do these other things to heal and support ourselves and do that inner, reparenting without someone available,
it. Yeah, yeah.
to do that work because they're just not going to do it, right? I've never, in as long as I've been doing this and as many people I've come in contact with and have in my community, I've never seen a parent, um, you know, deeply turn things around, go to therapy, do whatever they need to do, um, long term. Have you
Hmm.
seen that? Have you ever seen a parent come in and say, "Hey, wow, yeah, I made terrible mistakes or whatever. Let me get therapy. Let me get sober. Whatever I need to do."
I haven't
I,
seen that when they have
yeah,
had allocated roles to their children and
mm,
scapegoat. So I haven't
yeah,
come across that. I mean, the abuse we're talking about here is at the severe spectrum, severe
yeah,
end of the spectrum. So yes, I mean they're not really available. They don't have the awareness.
yeah,
The big issue there is a lack of empathy. When a person doesn't
mm,
have the capacity for empathy, that's
right,
huge. That's huge.
yeah,
Whatever is going on in the brain, whatever
right,
trauma they have is just
hmm,
absolutely huge, because they can
yeah,
hurt their child. They can see that they're hurting their child, and they can sleep at night. So
yeah,
that's quite a different, that's a different type of person we're talking about here. Different,
right, yeah,
level of person.
absolutely, yeah. So whether they're uh, a narcissist, whether they're a narcissist or some other personality disorder or whatever, they lack empathy, they lack that awareness, any kind of self reflection. They don't have those capabilities.
Mm,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And would you say that, I hear a lot of people say that scapegoats come from a narcissistic family. Is that what is that your take on it? That a scapegoat is from a narcissistic family dynamic?
Yeah, the way I phrase it is like it's a dysfunctional family unit.
Yeah.
So the parents have some type of, the parents are unhealthy and
Mm-hmm.
they're behaving in unhealthy ways. They're behaving in toxic ways.
Yeah.
They're presumably projecting some severe trauma inside them that they can't handle out
Yeah.
onto the next generation. It's unprocessed pain. Their mind
Mm-hmm.
is sick. We know that their mind is sick because they just keep bullying their
Yeah.
own child, and they're told that the child tells them, listen, you're hurting me, please stop, please stop.
Yeah.
But they just won't, and they
Yeah.
just lack the capacity to stop. They also kind of have this sense of entitlement. No, I'm allowed to do this
Mm.
because, society doesn't see this as a problem. So I'm just going to walk out the front door and be, hailed as this brilliant person in society. And then I can
Yeah.
come home and behind the closed door, I can treat you whatever way I want to, and I'm going to get
Yeah.
away with it. And you don't have
Yeah.
voice, and you don't have a say in the matter. And you're just a child and I'm the adult. So I can do what I want. So it's a very weird way of growing up. Like a coach
Yes.
said to me one day, she says it's like growing up in an unsupervised psychiatric ward.
Mm.
That's definitely something I can relate
Yeah.
to because the insanity was just off the charts.
Yeah, so confusing, right? Just
Yeah.
so much confusion.
Mm.
And that's where we really, you know, um, go into the world as adults and really lack a sense of self and, trusting ourselves, right? Because every is like, is it me? Is it them? Is it me? Because of that crazy making, gaslighting and manipulation and having our realities denied.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dysfunctional families operate on denial. There's just
Hmm.
like there's a rule of denial, and there's also another rule that, this happens and you're not allowed to speak about what is happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're never allowed voice it. There's no words for it. You can't explain it. You learn very early on that you're not allowed to talk about this because you're
Hmm.
gaslit and you're told you're the crazy one.
Yeah.
So there's never any conversation about it. So you just kind of slump back into this trance of denial that
Mm.
everybody else is in.
Yeah.
And also, like when the scapegoat is being bullied, it's like the attack happens very quickly sometimes,
Hmm.
kind of happens. And then straight after it happens, there's this kind of amnesia that happens.
Mm.
Everybody goes into a kind of denial. Oh, that didn't happen. And then there's kind of that eerie sense of calm after.
Yeah.
And then it's like a
Hmm.
cycle of abuse. Then it goes
Yeah.
into maybe a bit of love bombing or something, or there's a bit of
Right.
normality. We're a
That's
happy
right.
family. And that's the crazy making. Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, a lot of people who have been in the role of the scapegoat child and they're in adulthood, they've heard so often from their parents that you're the crazy one, there's something wrong
Hmm.
with you, we're going to send you to therapy, you're the problem, that they really internalize that, and they will
Yeah.
have a lot of self-doubt about that and ask themselves, oh, was it that bad? Is it me? Is there something wrong
Yeah.
with me? Because you've been heard,
Absolutely.
you listen to that for so long. Like all
Right.
through your developmental years, your childhood, your teenage years, your brain is wired with that,
Yes.
all these damaging messages. So the brain is working perfectly in terms of, okay, I'm being programmed with this. So
Yes.
there's no other way for the brain to operate, only to have massive self-doubt and
Right.
yeah, just constantly being thrown off your center. It's like, you're walking on eggshells and you don't have any foundation of self.
That's right. Yeah. And and again, a lot of times being the scapegoat, we are the ones that end up with eating disorders and addictions and depression and anxiety. Um, do you see that? You know, what are some of the effects of this that you see that are, you
Yeah.
know, not to, you know, that are because someone's traumatized. That's why they have anxiety and depression and right, they're traumatized.
Absolutely, yes. Because there's such like an abandonment there. There's no love in
Yeah,
a dysfunctional family. So of course
yeah,
you're going to have like addiction, anxiety, depression, and not being able to get through life, like always kind of coming up against brick walls, maybe
right.
sabotaging behavior. And of course, on the surface, like you'll try your best to look like a
Yeah,
normal person, to fit into society, to have
yes,
a career, to get on and do things. And we have a high propensity to just brush it under the carpet because that's the culture we come from within our
yeah,
family and
yeah,
out of our family.
right.
Brush it under the carpet, pretend it didn't happen, shove it down into the deepest recesses of your
Mm,
subconscious, just pretend it's not there and let's
right.
live our life. And
Yeah,
then it comes to a point in your life where it catches up with you as well.
right.
If it hasn't caused severe damage in your 20s, you know, if you've kind of tried to get
Yeah,
yeah, just especially like anxiety, panic attacks, any type of addictions, a real difficulty with relationships with people because it's
mm,
a relationship injury.
right.
I put loads
Absolutely.
of limiting beliefs like I'm all alone, I don't belong,
Mm,
like real difficulty in group situations because you've been bullied. You've been,
right.
you've been the target of bullying from the first group that you were in, which is your family of origin. So of course
Right.
it's going to carry forward.
Yeah.
And yeah, finding it difficult to get a solution as well because the pain and the trauma is so deeply entrenched. It
Mm,
it takes a while to get help with that. And
yeah.
of course, we mentioned invalidation that can be extremely damaging and just set us
Yes.
right back in our healing.
Yes. Yes. That's so true. I've experienced that myself so many times.
Mm,
Yeah. And that's why it's so important, again, with this work, is that really, you know, and again, a lot of coaches, therapists, helping professional don't take it back to the family of origin. They don't go there. They kind of skip that step or play around on the surface. Um, and this is really where it started, in that, you know, your first relationship was your caregivers.
yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
complex childhood trauma, so yeah,
Yeah.
the way to deal with that is to look at the childhood. So
Yeah, exactly. And really, you know, your first relationship is going to be the mirror for, you know, how you relate to others going forward. And being the scapegoat is, you know, I guess you might say a lonely role in a way. And I've felt this. I still feel it every now and, you know, twinges of that loneliness, right? Because
mm,
it's a lonely role.
mm,
Um, and at the same time, I won't trade that for my peace and freedom. But there is, you know, a twinge of loneliness that perhaps never goes away, because this, you know, this is what happened to us, right? So, and I hear that from others too. That, you know, there's this deep sense of loneliness, and I remember having that, you know, that deep loneliness. And again, I still feel a twinge of that, but that peace and freedom, I will not give up, right? So,
mm,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, but
It's really
sometimes there's a
severe.
loneliness that people feel, and sometimes it can send them back to the family, right? It can send them
Yes.
back there, and that's okay. That happens.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes, it's just a really severe attachment rupture from
yeah,
your primary
severe.
caregiver.
Yeah.
So when we're a human and when we're born, we need to connect with a primary caregiver. And the
Yes.
difficulty with being born into a dysfunctional family is that the caregiver has mental illness, uh,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have empathy, doesn't have the ability to connect. So the nervous system is not developed when we're a newborn. We need that connection with the primary caregiver to get our
That's
nervous
right.
system online. And when
Yeah.
that primary caregiver is compromised, we suffer from a severe attachment rupture, which
Yeah.
of course it feels like an abandonment.
Mm.
As a
Yes.
human, you can't survive as a little infant on your own in the world.
That's
So
right.
psychologically, that has impact going forward, and especially the whole, being the scapegoat. You're rejected, you're ostracized, you're
Mm.
constantly being given the message that you don't belong. You don't belong with us. We don't love you. You're treated with contempt as well. So of course, it's very, very lonely. It's very isolating. You
Isolated.
do
Yeah.
feel like you don't belong. And then for us in recovery, it's getting us finding a sense of belonging, because like as a
Yeah.
human, we're tribal creatures, we're social creatures,
Right.
supposed to belong with your family of origin, with your extended family. And when you don't have that, it's like you're cut off from your lineage, you're cut off.
Oops, I think we cut out.
Yeah, we're back.
Oh,
Yeah,
there we
I
go.
think
Okay.
we're back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're cut off from all of that. So you can feel like a bit of a lone wolf.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, for
think it's
sure.
slightly easier nowadays. In recovery, we can get help with that and find our own inner attachment as part of the healing
Mhm.
process, and be our
Yeah.
own inner parent.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yeah, it really is that deep attachment wounding.
Yeah,
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 that is I would say that's about the biggest wound there is, that abandonment and rejection. For me, I just knew my mom didn't want me. She made it really clear that she didn't want me, right?
mm-hmm.
And I mean, I can remember that from the smallest memory. The first memory I had of my mother was that she didn't want me, and it was very apparent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I never bonded to her. Now I know why. Again, back then I thought it was my fault. I must have done something wrong, but I never
Yeah,
bonded because, I mean, babies will bond. I always say babies will bond. Babies want to bond.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's that
yeah.
parent that can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or they don't have the nervous system
Yeah.
capacity for that. So very, very, I'd say that's about the biggest, deepest wound there is.
It's terrifying for a little child as well, because it
Mm,
just puts the nervous system straight into survival mode
that's right.
and hypervigilance.
Yeah.
And how can I be
Yeah.
safe here?
Terror. Yeah.
And that's,
Absolute terror.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
very taxing. It's very taxing. It uses
Mhm.
up a lot of energy.
It
So
does.
a lot of your energy as a child and as a teenager is going into trying to keep yourself safe, trying to tell
Hmm.
yourself that you're safe, trying to strategize to placate the parents so they don't get
Yeah.
angry and you can get your needs met. Uh,
Yeah.
and then you're at a disadvantage because you're not able to kind of just go out and live your life normally, and the house that
Right.
you grow up in is not a safe zone.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that most people are in survival mode. I was, and I didn't know it, right? So, being in survival mode and not knowing you're in survival mode because you just think that's normal,
Mm,
until again you start getting, your body starts breaking down. You might have autoimmune might start, those kinds of
yeah,
things. So that was true for me and true for a lot of other people. As you get a little older, but I see it in younger folks too. that body breakdown from the survival stress.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, just recognizing that survival mode um, works because we're staying safe, but at some point it doesn't work anymore, and your body, can't keep up that cortisol and adrenaline, those
Yeah.
high levels, right,
Mhm.
continually.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So such good stuff, such good stuff. So we're gonna wrap up here, and I wondered if you had anything else that you wanted to share or tell the viewers as we wrap up this really informative talk about being a scapegoat.
Well, we've spoken a lot about how it manifests and all about it,
Hmm.
and maybe to give a message of hope,
Yeah.
the recovery process.
Yes.
There is people out there in the world on the interwebs that can help
Yes.
you. And the first step is the education piece. Just
Hmm.
kind of understanding what happened, like all these very complex dynamics within the family,
Yeah.
and also to let people know that there is a way to heal from the complex trauma. There
Yeah.
is lots of different tools, lots of different modalities. There's lots of support groups now that you can
Hmm.
find, and people who understand your experience, understand
Right.
what you've been through. And there's many, I take a 360-degree approach to healing. Like we look at, clearing the limiting beliefs, doing the inner reparenting work,
Hmm.
working with the inner child, understanding where the trauma lives in the psychology, and
Hmm.
understanding how to work with it. And boundaries, of course, is a big area, healthy
Yeah.
boundaries, because we didn't have boundaries in our family of
Right.
origin. So there's a whole lot, and that all can be learned. Uh,
Yeah.
so you can get the information. The information is out there. It's just about educating yourself, and also doing things to work with the nervous system to try and bring it down from the high stress
Hmm.
response.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, you'll find lots of tools out there. So it is definitely possible. And it's like, well,
Hmm.
for me, I learned from a lot of different people,
Yeah.
and they all helped in different ways.
Right.
So it's definitely possible. There is people that have gone before you who have come through it. And
Yes.
so definitely there's a light at the end of that tunnel.
Yes, absolutely, there is. And I would add on to that again, going back to education is good to get educated. That's always a great first step to get some awareness of what
Mhm.
happened.
Mm.
And then really finding, again, a professional that works at this level, the level of the body and the nervous
Mhm.
system.
Mhm.
And I'm a fan of internal family systems as well.
Love it.
Um, yeah, that was I realized somewhat early on that somatic experiencing is great, but there's
Yeah.
still like a missing, there was a missing thing. And IFS kind of filled the gap there, and a couple of, start filling the gaps.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, with some other things, but it really, because of the level, um, of damage with this complex and developmental trauma that we endured, it definitely requires professional help, right? And in a safer, safer relationship,
Mhm.
dynamic container,
Mm.
um, because that's how we're going to heal. And
Mm.
again, those parents are not safe. We can't do that with them. So we got to recreate it in a safe space where you're heard, seen, validated. And that really takes somebody that has, I believe, has lived this themselves like we have. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So training and lived experience, because we've been down this road and we know what it feels like in our bodies.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So important. So yeah, this has been really, 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 really helpful. I want to thank you so much for coming and spending this time with me, um, and talking about this more. Yeah,
Thank you very much, Tracy. It's been great
yeah.
talk.
Thank you. All right. I hope you guys get a lot out of this episode. Again, Mary can be found on Instagram. What's your Instagram again?
The
Scapegoat?
handle is at Scapegoat Child Recovery.
Scapegoat Child Recovery. And then website is marytoolan.com.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Wonderful. Thanks so much.